Hi everybody, I'm Jay the Video Guy for the Photography Academy, and welcome to tonight's Top Talk webinar with photographer Simon Leach. I know I have him in the wings. Hi Simon, are you there?
Yes, good evening Jay, how are you doing?
I'm good mate. Everything okay with you?
Yes, it is.
Excellent. Simon, I just want you to just tell us a little bit about you, your journey into photography and sort of a bit of a background on where you are now with your photography, please.
Right, okay, yeah. Good evening everyone. Blimey, where'd you start? Way back when, 16 years old, parents thinking that I was going to get a proper job, maybe work in a bank, bailed out of school with not the best qualifications. You're kind of talking late 80s, mate. It was, you know what it was like then. Everybody wanted to be in the finance industry, everybody wanted to be banking, so I got turned down an awful lot, and I kind of started thinking, well, what am I going to do? Because luckily my parents were the sort of people that went, you've either got to get a job, you've got to go back to school, or you know, you're not sitting around the house, you're doing something. And I had my first camera when I was 7 and just kept taking pictures, not really taking it seriously, but just, you know, family holidays and all that kind of thing. And I, long story short, managed to land an apprenticeship. And that's where it all started, 1987, so a long time ago. Yeah, and just since then, really, got into it, really took to it. Fantastic first boss. Down in the Bristol area, GP photographer, doing everything from kind of building sites, progress photography, through to aerial photography, hanging out of aircraft, doing a bit of PR work. Knew I needed to move on from him after about 5 years. Did a bit of travelling, worked in a lab for a couple of years, so learned an awful lot of the kind of the colour relationships and processing and printing and all that kind of side of things. And then realised that I really wanted to be behind the camera, so mid-90s now, decided to get out of that and was convinced to actually apply to do a degree, and I ended up very lucky with a place at Blackpool. Did a degree there, went to Manchester, freelance assistant, moved into being a photographer in my own right. And then kind of that almost brings us up to where I will start with the images, but got heavily involved with the Association of Photographers, which is, for those of you who don't know, is one of the big professional associations. Got involved with them as a member director to start off with in 2007, and I was doing that as a voluntary role through until about the middle of last year. Doing my own photography a little bit as well, but obviously these things affect what you do. So that's kind of my very plotted and CV in brief, if you like.
Excellent, mate. And what so specialised in any kind of? Well, obviously, we know we do a lot of commercial work. What is your sort of? Is there a specialty, or are you still now a jack of all trades?
No, very much. The more you move up the ladder, you try and kind of specialise more. So it's people-based work now, mainly for advertising. It's kind of on the fashion borders, although it's not couture fashion. It's mainly fashion for marketing purposes. A little bit of editorial work coming through as well. Things are changing at the moment because of the stuff that I've been doing with the AOP, but that's the main focus going forward. It's going to be the marketing for fashion clients and for clients that are close to that. I do pick up bits of corporate work and that kind of thing, corporate marketing, because of my background and certain people that know me from years gone past. And when I was based in Manchester, I was known as a still life specialist, so there's a large amount of lighting that's involved in what I do, which we'll talk about later as well. But it's, yeah, I've kind of done a little bit of everything, to be honest. I haven't touched the social side, I haven't done weddings. I've done 3 in my life, and I'm useless at them. But yeah, it is quite a checkered history, but that's kind of the specialism going forward.
Brilliant, and I know that's primarily what we're going to be seeing tonight, because I've had a sneak peek of behind the scenes. Brilliant, Bud. What I'm going to do is just to remind everybody, please use the question panel to submit any questions that you have of Simon. And Simon's happy for me to field questions as we look at his images and he talks to us, but also if I need to hang on to anything, there is a question and action sensor on the end. But you need to use your question panel to get those questions over to me during the webinar. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hand the screen over to you, Simon. So, and I'll give you the okay that we can all see it. I just need to move that on, so change presenter. So, and I'll once
doing that, and because of the first image, I'm just going to warn people, there is some imagery in here that it's not kind of glamour work or anything like that, but there is some nudity stuff.
Oh no, that's a good point. I didn't pick up on that, but
so yeah, basically, I don't like talking about my work a huge amount, and Jay's kind of twisted my arm into this one a little bit. So we're going to start at a point around 6 years ago, and what I'm going to talk mainly about is developing more of a personal style, and something that I've been involved in. I've got a mentor, a guy that mentors me. I've been very lucky. Very talented gentleman that talks to me every so often about imagery and where my direction's going and what I'm about personally, because I've got this big thing that, as we all know, the photographic industry is hugely tough. It's getting tougher. The technology is almost taking over from the creativity in some areas, and I think the only way that you stand above that is by being individual and having something that's a little bit unique, and certainly an identity within your imagery that people can see. And so rather than just talking you through imagery, which you may or may not find interesting, but I don't necessarily like talking about, I'm going to use this time to talk about how I've developed a style and perhaps actually infuse you into trying some different things with your work and looking and thinking about who you are as a person. So the reason this imagery is on the screen, like I say, it's from about 6 years ago, and really, having turned professional 25 plus years ago, having first picked up a camera 35 years ago, this is quite a seminal moment for me, in the fact that I've done Blackpool. It's very much a Blackpool ethos we're talking about, from the time that I was on the course, which is I graduated 16 years ago, something like that. And it's about understanding who you are and where your influences come from, and trying to kind of get some consistency in your own work. I've been meeting with the guy that's now mentoring me for about 18 months, a year at this point, and I'd obviously got images that I still show, and I'm really pleased of before this, but this kind of suddenly nailed it. And when I took this and put it in front of him, he went, "You're starting to get somewhere. You've got something. Something about the simplicity of it, the quality of it," because I'm very much about the quality of imagery as well. I spend a lot of time creating images, and that started to work, and we started to pull things forward. So that's why we start on this particular shot. Next up is actually a commission shot. A yoga teacher, yoga instructor, and it happened that she approached me about the time of the previous shot, and it was the first time where somebody had come to me really, up until this point, obviously coming from a GP background, you get a brief in, you talk to the client about what you want, you use your technical knowledge, you use your craft, and you go out and you try and fulfill the brief to the best of your ability, and hopefully take it back and the client is happy with what they've got. And this was the first time somebody had really approached me, and I knew this person creatively through where my studio was in those days. And she said, "Look, I need some imagery, and I want to create something, but I want to create a bit of feel to it, and I want you to kind of come up with the ideas and how we're going to do this. And I don't really have a brief, just come up with something for me." So the only thing that she'd added in was the obviously this, it's not a permanent tattoo on the back, it was an artist that she knew that she got to create this, it's a hieroglyphic if you want. It does actually say something, I can't for the life of me remember what, but it's connected very closely to her, and that was the only thing that she kind of imposed on the shoot. That, and obviously she showed me a range of poses and or positions, yoga positions, that she would like to illustrate. And this is one of the key shots. But it was the first time where you kind of step into that creative director role and you start to think of yourself as something other than just being a technical photographer. And you can see some of the elements. We spoke briefly in the introduction with Jay about my lighting, which a lot of people see as key to my work. And bringing those elements in, the simple backgrounds, the lighting, trying to draw the eye of the viewer to the areas you want to look at, or you want them to look at, and trying to control them, was an interesting process to go through. So we move on, and I'm sure Jay knows the order of these, so he's going to jump in if they're not going through properly, but hopefully now you can see a young man in a pool. The reason I've put this image in is because it is a personal shot. There's a mixture of personal and commissioned in here as we go through this process. Sometimes you get lucky. It's not about over-planning every shot that you go into, but I was here, I was lucky to be in this location doing a number of shots, and basically where I start to pull my inspiration from is, certainly in those days, was collecting a lot of photography from other photographers, from magazines, from books, from all different sources, maybe artwork as well. I go to exhibitions, I'll buy postcards normally after they produce postcards from exhibitions. I'll buy a few of those to keep them in mind. I've got a wall in my studio where I put them all in clip frames and I keep them as reference. And I look at these and I pull in different elements from different shots, different people's shots. Never want to copy anything. You never want to be seen as somebody who copies another photographer's style or another photographer's work. For one, it's actually could be seen as plagiarism, and you could run into legal problems with it. But secondly, you're always going to be weaker trying to copy somebody else. You want to get to the things that you like. So it's about looking at other people's work, looking at other creativity, painting, reading books, whatever, and identifying the things that really speak to you. Are you about bright colours? Are you about movement? Are you about lots of energy? Are you about very soft colours and simple things and kind of smooth lines? And all these different things create a bit of a personality for you, and identifying in other people's creativity what you like will help you identify what you're about as a creative yourself. And so this is I'm not too far down the line here, but I'm starting to pull together images that I like, looking at them, pulling influence together, and then I've come up with this shot. And actually this, although a little bit lucky, has become again one of the key images as I move forward, because what you then start to do is you develop images that are very key within your journey, within your creative path. Grace at Red Hall. A little bit of the opposite actually, completely planned image, in that it's a model that I'd worked with previously, so I knew her capabilities. I'd worked with the makeup artist previously, so I knew that she was excellent and that she would give me what I wanted. I'd worked with the stylist again, asked her to sort stuff, and I knew, and I'd gone along with her to the supplier of the outfits and the lingerie for this shoot, and looked at them and helped her pick out things that we worked through together what was going to work. But it is still quite early on in the process, so for me there are things that I would like to improve about this image. The background is still too distracting. It's kind of, there's a little bit too much there that's defined that I would like to kind of simplify off. But other than that, yes, it's about a planning process, and it's about getting a location. We talked to a location. She was actually an interior designer who knew a lot of the locations, and she'd helped this hotel work on a number of rooms. So she was able to help us get access to a really nice suite in the hotel to work with. And it's pulling all these connections together and planning something a little bit bigger in some cases. So very much the opposite to the previous shot, which was just pulling some influences together. Okay, I had a very good makeup artist and that kind of thing, but it was a little bit more kind of instantaneous. This had been in planning for about a month when we actually went to the shoot. And then again, some bigger commissions. Been very lucky in that I've actually been commissioned to work out in the Middle East a couple of times, about 3 times now in all, in Bahrain. Lovely place to be. Absolutely adore it. And it's a very small country that has a lot of problems, and which we won't go into now, but a lot of it's external to the country itself, external influence. But it opens up opportunities and it opens up challenges as well. Obviously the challenge of language wasn't too much of a problem because I was working with an English-born creative director who I'd worked with previously in the UK. And a lot of our Arabic countries, a lot of people speak English anyway, so you haven't got the problem there. But obviously there's design considerations because the written Arabic is read right to left rather than left to right. And obviously needing a translator, the weaver that's in the shop, the lady, was a very traditional Bahraini lady and didn't speak a word of English, so I did need a translator for her. Other challenges were that I was mainly without my kit, and obviously I've said already that I'm very much into my lighting, so to arrive in a studio for a campaign of, I think it was 12 finished images that we actually put together in the end, post-campaign for this bank. And I'd been told that the studio would be supplied. All I needed to bring was my camera and my laptop, and all the lighting would be there. Great. Don't need to fly an awful lot out with me. And I arrived, and the lighting just wasn't in the state that I would have liked it to have been in. And actually, some of it I didn't want to use. I just took one look at it and said, my love of life says that I won't use that piece of kit. Thank you very much. Even if the photographer owns it, does want to. And so I ended up doing the best part of a 12 shoot campaign with predominantly one light source and dragging in, when I absolutely had to, 1 or 2 others, but not the kind of 8 lights that I'd been promised to be able to shoot this. And luckily I'd taken some black foil with me and some trace, some diffuse material, and a shoot-through umbrella, and this is what you get. You fall back on your technical knowledge. You pull in your knowledge of the imagery and the style that you like to shoot, and you can come up with what certainly the client likes. Is quite a nice campaign, and one of the images that I was particularly pleased with, being, I hope, quite effective. So yeah, interesting little shoot we had there for 6 days. My computer's just decided. There we go. Right. Moving on then. Kind of a commission. A friend of mine, turning 30, and she said, can you do some photographs of me? I like your work, I like what you're doing. So obviously looking at the work, that's the style that I'm creating, and particularly she wanted to do a full nude as she turned 30. In her words, not mine, before anything heads south. So yeah, a great shoot, and again it was a position that I was placed into where I was, to all intents and purposes, taking on the creative direction role as well as being photographer, working with no other crew, which is not something that I was generally used to. So there's no makeup artist, there's no stylist, obviously no stylist on this shot, but we did a number of shots through the day. And really an interesting result in that, you know, you go in expecting just to do photographs for this friend and spend a day on the weekend working with somebody, and being freed up into quite a relaxed atmosphere. Obviously somebody I knew pretty well, we got on well, we had a good laugh, and working together with her on shots that she'd like to create, but very much bringing in the atmosphere and the control of the lighting and that I would like to do, and experimenting a bit with that, and coming up with some results that were a little bit unexpected, really, and really something that I've added into my own portfolio, my own website, through just having a really nice day and enjoying shooting. So, two shots to talk about now, and I've put two up here because, as well as being upright and then fitting quite nicely, it's a bit of a series that's developing throughout this journey that I'm now on. And what I'll do at this point is I'll add in that the concepts that I really identified all that time back ago, where we're at the Stocky Shop with my mentor, was themes of elegance, beauty, sophistication, simplicity. And these kind of words that identify the kind of things that I like, kind of things that I'm drawn to, and the kind of influences in my work that I find very appealing, and within other people's work. And that doesn't mean to say that I can't appreciate other creativity that works on other themes. You know, I'm personally not a huge fan of documentary photography, but as a genre, when it's done well, and when you have a photographer who I can, or even a videographer in certain cases, that I can identify has got a personal style, has a personal engagement with their subject, and also has developed a creative style that really communicates what they're trying to say about their subject to the viewer, then I can really appreciate that as strong creative work, even though it's not necessarily a genre that I'm immediately drawn to. And so, moving back to these two images, by the time I shot both of these, and these two are shot about 3 or 4 months apart, a few years ago, well, probably about 3 or 4 years ago now, I'm really starting to nail down these words and try and have them in the back of my mind every time I'm shooting. Still pulling out influence from other people, from other creatives, and from other areas as well, not necessarily just photography now, but like I say, looking at exhibitions, both art and photography, starting to look at moving image more, starting to look at film more, and identifying elements within those creative mediums that I particularly like. And you can see, you know, keeping the background simple, keeping the lighting very soft but directional. And I work a lot, you know, models actually quite dislike working with me at times, and that's because if they don't bring their element to the shoot, it doesn't always work. So I do have failures. You know, you don't look at even photographers that are really quite famous. I will guarantee you all of them have their failures. But what you learn to do over your time in as a creator and as a photographer, you learn to edit. And editing, I would say, is one of the most important things that defines the professional from the amateur, from the person that just records images of family holidays and that kind of thing. Is, you know, you try and only show the stuff that you feel is really strong. And hopefully you'll agree with me that these are perhaps a couple of stronger images. But it is about me working with models, gaining their confidence, but not over-directing them, because I like a more natural state of the model, and I don't want to. I find that if I over-direct too much, I actually distract them and they become too posed, too contrived, and I want that natural look to them that hopefully allows them to show off their elegance, their sophistication, and I've picked these people for that. Obviously, when we go to commissions, we don't necessarily have complete freedom just to work in the same way that we do with our personal work. Fashion design client, manufacturer of sportswear, Pro Skins. I've worked with several sportswear manufacturers over the years, as well as others. And in all of them, there's a strong design element, because obviously they have the people within their teams that actually design these garments, design the clothing, and also it's very precious to them. So they're very passionate about the imagery and the way the stuff's represented and how you take it forward. Some of you might recognise the chap in the photograph. He's a gentleman called Jason Robinson. He's a professional rugby player, or was a professional rugby player, and he was part of the 2003 winning World Cup team when we defeated Australia. A game I very much enjoyed. If there's any Australians listening, you did get your own back, but we'll always remember 2003. Brilliant guy to work with, fantastic personality, always gives you 110%. But about the photography and bringing your own style in, yeah, it's just a simple pack shot at the end of the day. It could quite easily have been shot as a cutout on a white background, and the client would have probably been happy. You could have left the lighting fairly flat. You could have said, you know, I just need to illuminate the product, and that's what they're looking for. But actually, working closely with the designer, which is a young lady who I work well with and got on well with, and I'm still in touch with now, even though she's moved on from this particular brand. She was keen to kind of push the brand forward and create something a little bit more. Obviously enjoyed working with me, and we shared certain synergies within our creative view. Some disagreements as well, there always is, but you work together and you develop something, and she could look through my portfolio and say, I like this, I'm not so keen on this, and you come up with something that hopefully is a little bit further beyond the obvious for the client. So in terms of a pack shot, yes, the lighting is a little bit more contrasty. You have got quite a dark shadow on the left-hand side of Jason's face as you look at him. The background is not plain. You know, I was lucky enough that this is a studio I was sharing at the time, and so lovely white brick walls that we were able to drift some lighting down, and get something just that little bit different. You know, you're still showing the product, you're still showing the logos, but just taking it that step beyond, and hopefully exciting the client and giving them a bit of a passion and enthusiasm to work with you again, and allow you that little bit of creative freedom and keep your life interesting. Very different feel from the last shot, but this is another commission. This is actually the last time I was out in the Middle East. And it's not because I'm trying to show off that I've been out there. It was really just a bit of a technical exercise to start off with, that you're in the offices of BCDR AAA. They were setting up an independent arbitration service, mediation for big business. So you've got high-profile businesses that they're trying to encourage to come to this location as a neutral venue to mediate their differences within business. So the brief was quite vague. It's a very professional atmosphere, it's a very welcoming atmosphere, and it's a very relaxed atmosphere, and those are basically the things they wanted. So you don't want to go too dark with that, because you don't want people feeling oppressed. You want it to be quite bright, but obviously then there's also the technical challenges of that nameplate at the back. You can see there is a slight reflection in it. I didn't manage to kill everything, but it is actually brushed aluminium, so it was not quite a mirror, but just a pain in the neck to light. You're in quite a confined space. Luckily, the models that we have there were very easy to work with, very patient, and didn't mind that this was actually the first shot of the shoot. So it's the style setter for a shoot that's going to go on for the next 2.5 weeks on and off over time. And so really needed taking the time over to make sure that I was happy, that the video company that I was working with, who were producing video for them, were happy, because it was actually their end client and they were overseeing the creative direction, although I pretty much worked on my own through the whole thing. And also then the end client was happy. And immediately after the shot, I then sat for 45 minutes in front of 2 of the clients, basically with them disputing and arguing between themselves what the creative direction was and whether that I was going to be able to take forward, and whether they needed more options and all the other things that clients should have decided before I got there, but haven't. But it went through and they liked it, and obviously this set the style for, like I say, a big shoot. 350 images delivered at the end of 2.5 weeks. Yeah, just technical challenges all the way through of mixed lighting and different spaces and all the rest of it. So pulling in all the technical knowledge, but again trying to retain a little bit of the personal ideals of not allowing things to become too cluttered and keeping them clean. Right, we're moving through at a pace, no questions yet, but again, moving on to another image that was a little bit longer in planning. It's a personal test again, and because of my themes, I've been talking with my mentor about kind of a time when people had too much money, were very relaxed, and almost exuded this confidence that gave them the elegance and the sophistication almost with very little effort. And we were talking about the 60s era and kind of the French Riviera, and which I'll come back to, and the Italian Riviera, and all those kind of images that you can think of from that time. And I put the shot together, and I talked to a makeup artist and a stylist, and I very much like to collaborate with these people and get them on early in the process and say, look, this is kind of roughly the idea, but I want your input and I want you to work with me on this, because they get more out of it and it enables them to get something that works for their portfolio. Makeup artists, well, both of them that I've worked with on this shoot, I've worked with again since then. And although obviously I do like the shot, it is a point at which I wanted to explain to you that you really need to understand where the people you're collaborating are coming from and what they're bringing to the shoot, and do you understand each other's ideas? Because I have to say, in this point, the stylist and I, we've discussed the whole 60s vibe and what people were wearing and all the rest of it, and what turned up on the day and what my expectation of what would turn up on the day were two different things. And that's not to say that it was completely wrong. It just differed. And that's kind of a difficult thing to deal with at 9:30 in the morning over the first coffee, and trying to keep everybody fired up for the day. You've got 2 models. We brought both models up from London to a location in the Midlands that we were going to shoot. And you kind of can't put a downer at that point on the day and go, oh no, this isn't what I expected, it's all going to go wrong. You've got to make it work. But do take the time and work with people and make sure that you understand where they're coming from, so that you get the most out of every opportunity that you get to progress your style and when you're trying to take things forward. You won't get like we said before, you won't get every image right, and things deviate. I've got images, where I've gone completely off left field, and I thought, right, elegance, sophistication, I want to try this shot and I want to do this, and you get terribly enthusiastic and terribly passionate about it, and you end up completely left field, and it doesn't quite work. But you learn from that, and you bring it back, and you always keep moving forward. So get interested in your photography, I guess, is kind of the underlying theme here. Okay, you don't, like I said, when you're on commissions, you don't get the chance to drive everything. But what I would say is if you're confident in what you do and how you do it, you can start to play with other things like the ideas. Editorial, if anybody's ever shot editorial, the one thing you know is the time, the facilities, the templates that you're asked to work to, the people that you're asked to photograph aren't necessarily people that are used to being in front of the camera. If they are used to, if they are had photographs taken of them regularly, they probably have bad experiences as well as good ones. Possibly work with photographers who are not necessarily as good as yourself, or they haven't actually connected with as yourself. So the real strong thing here and the challenge is to connect with those people quickly, to identify where you can get your shots within the area that you're meeting them, because very often you can't move very far from that. And if you're strong about your techniques, I keep coming back to techniques, always learn how to use your cameras, how to use your lights, all that basic stuff that Jay and Mark are teaching you on that side of is just vital, because things will go wrong or things will be thrown at you where you can't quite do it the way you want to or the way you're used to, and you need that knowledge and that fallback to be able to really get the shot and hopefully take it a little bit further as well than the client wanted. Commissioned to do a number of shots of this guy, Harvey Jacobson. He actually turned out to be a really interesting guy, and I got on with him. A little bit of a different character, but that's cool. I quite like that. And it was about getting him enthused, because he wasn't that keen to be in front of the spotlight. He'd much rather have just had a quick corporate portrait and left it at that. But I said, no, look, come on, let's try some ideas, try some different things. And I found the spaces, went back, walked him through them. So this is what I'd like to do. We start with something that you're comfortable with, and then we'll try other things. And this was quite a tight space, a lot of daylight coming in, a lot of stuff to control. You can see that on the wall the shadow's really still quite harsh, but I've had to fill it in a very narrow space to even get it down to that kind of level where I knew it would print when it went onto magazine print, which obviously isn't the worst, but it's not brilliant. And in the end, we got a number of shots, and he got a feature out of it for his company where there was, I think, 3 or 4 different shots they used inside, and we won the front cover for him because the imagery was strong. So, successful shoot from that point of view. They liked it because they got lots of publicity, and it was just purely knowing what you do, knowing where you would like the shots to be in an ideal world, and then going, okay, well, I'm happy with that in my own mind, so we can play with the ideas and where we want to put people. Okay, moving on. Beach exercises. A couple of images again on one thing. That's really because they fit together. Obviously, they're not from exactly the same idea or exactly the same series, but they're working again with ProSkins. The leggings on the right are from ProSkins. Another brand that they have is slightly more casual wear, and it's got the JR logo, which comes from the Jason Robinson involvement within the company. And obviously we had the pack shot from there earlier. And basically they'd never worked on location. They'd never really come out of the studio. We'd taken them quite a long way with the pack shots that I showed you earlier and a couple of marketing shots that went with those, but not as far as going on location, and certainly not as far as using models rather than Jason as being a face or other sports people that he had on relationships with. And so this, I had the opportunity. I was out, we were down in the south of France anyway, fantastic beach location. And I just said to them, look, what's your product line at the moment? What have we got? What samples have you got available? Obviously, as I said, I worked very well with the designer anyway, and she basically gave me free rein and said, yeah, great, if you want to get some shots, have this, and curried me up about 3 boxes worth of product. Cool, brilliant. Let's go and play with it. Let's go and do something that you might find just a bit different, might start some ideas. Obviously, I haven't pushed it a fantastic way. Very lifestyle images. The image on the right, yeah, probably if they were going to use it commercially, they would want to put a top on the model, but we didn't have tops available, and I didn't want to use something third party and conflict and all the rest of it. And obviously the model A is very confident. B, she would admit herself, is not tremendously curvaceous, and so you can get away with the image, particularly when it's a style setter for a company. And actually they came back and they went, yeah, no, it's absolutely fine, you know, we can work with things. And then the shot on the left, the guy, very much not the sportsman, a very light figure. The flare coming across the lens is something that they would never have looked at before. You know, me working on, I work on 2 camera systems, although I don't want to get too much into the technology that I use, but I use Prophoto lighting because it does give me the quality of the light. And there is fill light on these shots, but I also use a digital back on a medium format RZ, an old Mamiya film camera, which is a very static piece of kit and gives me the portraits and that we were looking at earlier. And then I use the Fuji X system, which I know that there's some films up on the Photographer Academy website where they've worked with the X system. And I got onto that very early, and it does allow me to do shots like the one on the left where I'm running backwards in the surf, trying not to fall over and get everything completely wet, and just gives you a completely different feel. So the mixture of those 2 systems together enables me to come up with different shots. I'm pretty sure the shot on the right was actually shot on the leaf back, so you can see the different feels where one's very static and the other one's obviously got movement in it, and I'm having to react to the way the model's walking for me and working with me. Same male model for those that didn't actually recognise him, and it's a personal shot. Similar location, beach location, and one of the things I was going to mention to you is that in terms of developing your personal work and your own personal style, I've found it very beneficial to actually set aside more than a day at times, and this is part of a week-long shoot that we did, which there wasn't any clients involved. It was a fantastic makeup artist that I know. He does celebrity stuff as well as stills and film, a guy called Scott. He's been around the industry longer than I have, and he understands that sometimes, you know, makeup's not about fantastic colours and over-the-top eyelashes and all the rest of it, and so he brought in that simplicity to the makeup and the tones, and we were able to get some cracking shots through the week just by working with the models, people that I knew and that I'd worked with and built up relationships with, Scott, who I knew, and you just focus on where you want to be stylistically, and it allows you to cut out an awful lot of the day-to-day crap by taking more than a few hours to do your own personal work. But occasionally things don't go wrong, and obviously this is a day where the weather did turn on us. It got very grey, it got very windy, and I'm actually working with a battery system like that was a couple of years old now, but I still have it, to put light into the models here, and to shoot on the Fuji, so I'm quite mobile, and get some images from the day that I really wanted. I really wanted to work on some interactions, but it just brought that other element in by working with the weather and working what was forced upon us, and obviously running light into being able to run light into the set as well really lifted the images. And it's something that I'd encourage you to do is obviously be aware of your health and safety, but don't just think about light as being a studios-based thing or just a flash on camera thing. Really, you know, try different things with it, and particularly if you've got the ability to work with some of the bigger lights, some of the battery lights that are available on the market now. It's a great experience to do. We've actually got, so the previous image, this image and the next one are all from this week, and hopefully you'll see the kind of imagery that I'm talking about by putting more than one day aside for your own personal work. This started out as a bit of a joke because actually I was down there, I team up with another photographer sometimes to go on these trips, and I'm hoping to pull another one together with him at some point. Great guy, but he shoots editorial in quite a different way to me, in the fact that he's DSLR, he works with very mobile flash units, kind of Ranger kits and that kind of thing, and very much puts the models into scenarios and kind of tells a story with them. And I love his work, but it's just not the way I shoot. And we've had this conversation and we wind each other up and we bounce off each other a lot. And it's great to have those relationships and be able to put work in front of people and discuss it, but not actually conflict. And this is actually the last shoot that I did in the week, pretty much. And I'd got so much. We'd had a great week, the both of us. We'd got loads of stuff. And we were kind of saying, well, you get to that point and you go, what are we going to do for the last day? And he was going off to do something completely insane. And I said to him, do you know what? I'm going to do what you do and some of your shots that are kind of less about the elegant poses and all the rest of it and are a little bit more relaxed. But I'm going to do it in my way. And I'd driven down to this location on my own with all my kit because there's no point in me flying. I need to take 4 heads with me. You know, I've got 4,500 joules worth of studio flash. So a lot of power, studio camera, big tripods, reflectors, all the rest of it. Massive 2 meter by 1200 softbox. So some big kit, and I'm going to throw all this lot at this one shot, you know, or this one series of shots, because I actually shot several models within this set, and just do it rather than kind of grabbing the shots with the small portable flash that you use, and see how it works. And he kind of challenged me, and then went, "Go on, then, see what you can get out of it. See if you can do it." And we ran each other up for a few hours. And long story short, I was shooting this particular image, and he walked around the corner to see my extension cables trailing from the villa and all the rest of it, and just went, maybe I should put more effort in. It worked, you know, and it's not quite the way he does it, but it was an interesting challenge to set myself in the, like I say, not a copy, doing it my way, but very much kind of taking his work and going, how would I do this? How would I approach it? Great shoot. And then this, the final image I've got from this particular week, and it's called Smoking Man, and I've been very humbled actually by at least one exceptional photographer who I know who is doing fantastic things at the moment and travelling all over the world, working for some very big companies, and he very much humbled me by turning around and going, "Oh yeah, I had a look at your work," and that image, you know, really stands out to me. So I had to put it in, not for that reason, but out of all the images I got from this trip, this was the one I went for. I came back, and when I got this, and I looked at it on screen afterwards as a raw file, and I would say that I do use a number of the images you've seen today are with an independent retoucher involved in the crew as well. So I use a one-man boutique retoucher, Claire, who's down in London, does fantastic things to my work. But it's not that I can't retouch. I do retouch in some of the images you've seen today. I've retouched myself. But again, it's about that collaboration, and she will bring things to the imagery sometimes that is just another pair of eyes and another take on it, and going, have you tried this grade? Have you thought about pulling these colours out, doing this with it, doing this with the contrast, whatever it is, and just kind of adding something extra into the work. And this is one of the images that she worked on for me and did a fantastic job. Made me look perhaps, you know, dare I say it, slightly better than I might be, but it was the culmination of all of the things that we've already talked about: the setting aside time, the pulling in influence, the making sure I had the kit that I wanted, that I was used to using, that I knew would give me the quality that I was looking for and the kind of files that I wanted to work with coming into post. That's very important. But it also brings in other influence. I told you that I've driven down with all the kit. And I wanted, going back to the swimming pool and the 60s vibe and the 60s Riviera, and you're going to be at a beach location in a villa, and you think, oh, actually we can pull in some of that 60s affluence and kind of almost lethargic, effortless sophistication and beauty that some of those people exuded. And so actually I went and brought 3 or 4 CDs of music from that time, and it's not music I'm into. If people that will know me would be quite shocked to hear me say that I was listening to that, bossa nova and some French female singers and all that kind of thing. But you buy it and you listen to it and you think, well, this is not what I'd listen to every day, but it gets your mind into that headspace and to give you something else to push yourself forward. Great, and and you come out with shots like this, and there's nothing better, to be honest. There's still little things. There's always little things in every image that you'd want to put right, but there's perhaps less in this one than some of the other images that I take. And then it's carrying on. It's about opportunity again. The story behind this image is that I've got family in Australia. And my wife is a researcher, and she was asked to present a paper at a conference in Australia. The university she worked with, or the funding body, I should say, that she works through, because she does work for the university, but it's all external funding, agreed to fund her trip to go and present at this conference because it was high profile enough. And that's great, because it means I can go and see family, and we're only paying for me to go. Cool. Downside is you're going to be sat in a hotel in New South Wales, in a smallish town for 4 days, and wife comes home at the end. I'd taken some work with me, and the wife came home at the end of the first day of the conference and said, "Are you bored yet? What are you going to do for 3 more days?" And I turned around and said, "Well, actually, I'm testing all tomorrow afternoon, and we're playing another test for Friday morning, so that'll pretty much cover it." And just with a face that is the kind of look that only the person that really knows you can give you, says, just how did you manage that, and only you could do it. And it was just simply getting online, again finding a creative, a makeup artist who turned out to be very good, a young lady, female firefighter actually, was her main job, but she worked shifts, she only worked 3 days a week, so that gave her enough time to develop her makeup. And she was really driven, she liked what I did, and she said, right, yeah, no, let's get a couple of people in, let's get sorted, let's do something. And so then you're faced with a situation where I obviously had a camera with me, but only Fuji. I had chucked a couple of reflectors in my suitcase, because I normally do, and a tripod, but nothing really in the way of lighting. But you can't turn down these opportunities. You think locations, when am I ever going to get back to go back to this location? Yeah, I'd love to go out and see the family again, but it's, I've been once before, and it was 20 years previously. So you just got to go for it and try and make something of it, and again, fall back on your technical knowledge and the ideas and the influence that you've managed to pull together. Whether it's a brown paper envelope you stick it in, or whether you're more organized and you do a scrapbook, or whether you stick it in a box in your desk, but look through it regularly and just kind of recognize why you like those images, and then when you come to these opportunities, you can then hopefully exploit them. This image actually I'm about to send off to Claire retrospectively and get her to have a look at, because I want her opinion on it. The retouch you're looking at is actually mine, and I'm sure she'll add something to it. But still, yeah, fantastic opportunity and a great experience to go and shoot with somebody different, collaborate with somebody different, and work quite quickly as well, because obviously we had chatted briefly on email a couple of times prior to me arriving in town, because I obviously got it in the back of my mind that I had 4 days to try and kill. and I think I first spoke to her about 2 days before we arrived in the town. Met on the first day, had a sit down, had a coffee. Again, anybody that knows me, I love to drink coffee and just talk over it. We set things up, and she did a lot of the legwork in getting in models because she had the contacts locally and providing the locations and everything. And this is actually her apartment she lives in. We tidied it up and did things with it, and great experience. But at the end of the day, you've also got to remember why you take photographs, and I hope that all of you are as passionate and enthusiastic about photography as a medium as I am. And as I mentioned very briefly right at the beginning, I've been involved in the Association of Photographers as a member director. It was a voluntary role. I got quite heavily involved, took up quite a lot of my time, and a lot of pressure and a lot of stress perhaps that came into my life and my work through that affected my photography and meant that I didn't take pictures as much as I would have liked to. And one of the ways that I got back into taking photography in the latter part of last year was through my love of travel and opportunities I've been given. And I shoot, when I'm away, landscapes and just kind of environments that I see and places I see, and they're not really for anybody to look at necessarily. Certainly not thought of them commercially up to this point, although there is an avenue that people are starting to become interested in them. But really it's just for my own personal satisfaction. And that's the importance of this image, is whatever you do, whatever you get involved in commercially, remember why you're a photographer. If you can be passionate about it, if it's your life, if it's your hobby, then you can just remember to enjoy it every so often and enjoy what is a fantastic experience and a creative experience. And actually from the same trip, this is somebody who's become a very good friend of mine, a young lady called Gao Jing. She's a famous photographer in her native China. She's an author. She is a collector. I was there with a group of people, and we named her a collector of souls because she brings like-minded people together. The group of photographers that she'd collected for this particular trip was myself. There was a chap from South Africa, an Afrikaans chap from South Africa, somebody from the Ukraine, somebody from actually who lives in the UAE but is originally from Oman. And obviously herself, Chinese, and a group of people from very different cultural backgrounds, very different ideals within their native countries, but who came together and who share this love of photography. And we've turned into, we get on fantastically well. And the guy from South Africa probably paid me the biggest compliment I ever paid, and he said, I never thought I'd be friends with anybody from England, and he had such an opinion of the English. And I thought, this is where photography is amazing. You can sit down with people from all over the world. Doesn't matter whether you travel or whether you're stuck in the UK and you just meet people who come in. But if you've got this level of photography, it does connect people. It sounds trite and it sounds superficial and like a stereotype, but it does. I kid you not. And basically this image is from a series of portraits that I was doing of people that I just met on the street and said, can I photograph you? And trying to bring in some of the influence, again, that I've done in my own personal work with the lighting and the studio stuff and all the rest of it, but obviously without any access to lighting at all, using purely natural daylight, just the camera and my knowledge and people that, weren't models, just everyday people, and going, can I take a photograph? I like something, there's something about you that attracts me to wanting to photograph you. And after watching me do this several times, Gao Jing, who doesn't like her own photograph being taken particularly, although it happens on a regular basis, so go on, take my photograph. And she's actually very self-conscious, and if she knew I started showing you this shot, she'd probably be quite embarrassed because she's got bare shoulders, but she does know. She does know. She's happy for me to use it, but she doesn't necessarily like me telling her when I use it, I guess is what I'm saying. But I love the image, and it just encapsulates her and her vibrance and her influence on me as well. So the final image, Joe will be happy because we have run over slightly. I'm sorry to anybody who was desperately waiting for something to eat tonight. But this is kind of me coming back to what I do. It's a little bit of everything. It's a studio shot. It's very heavily lit. It's me experimenting with my lighting. It's me coming up with ideas before the shoot. But it's also bringing in a little bit of influence and the passion that I've gained from the last kind of 6 to 12 months of actually working with people. This young lady, somebody I met, she has got a very limited amount of modelling experience, although it seems to be growing tremendously since I shot her. I don't think it's anything to do with me, it's just the fact that she kind of decided she liked it and she's put herself out there to get more experience. But again, working without a makeup artist, she did her own makeup. I worked with her on the styling, and coming up with some images that are quite unexpected, but just really going into it and going, I'm going to try something, I'm going to try some different lighting, I'm going to enjoy my photography, and yeah, coming up with an image that was partly unexpected, but quite pleasing to come up with. So that's where I am right now, and hopefully that's something that's going to keep pushing forward and keep me smiling for the next however long. But that's what I've got to show you today. I hope it's been interesting. That's where you find me. Basically, Jay introduced me to Simon R. Leach. If you're looking for me online, Simon R. Leach, only because there's a number of Simon Leach photographers. Stick the R in the middle, and you will find me on most searches. I am out there on the internet, and happy to hear from you, and happy to hear your thoughts if you'd like to.
Excellent, Simon. Thank you. Thank you so much. I wasn't interrupting, and I was aware that we ran over, but I don't think anybody would have a problem with that because
No.
the images are stunning. And I have to point out that when I met you, the first image that I ever saw was the smoking man. I think that's the first image you ever showed me, and it was at that point I knew that I wanted to invite you to join us, to share your work with us. And I hadn't really actually spoken to you that much at that point. But that image had sold me on its own. To be fair with questions, I've got some for you. But what's been quite nice is that I've been stockpiling them, and you've actually been answering them as you go. Most of them, sort of the generic ones. I know we weren't going to get heavily onto your kit and your lighting, but you've already touched on that. Before I take the screen back, if it's not too much of a problem, could you jump back to the image of the rugby player in the black outfit?
Let's see, the rugby player in the black outfit is there. There we go.
I'm not going to do it with loads of the images, but we've had a couple of queries because you've talked a lot about the lighting and stuff. Would you mind just quickly sort of giving us a lighting explanation on that, what you're using on that?
Oh, you just...
I'm only going to ask you to do it once.
Yeah, go on then. Right, what I would say, first and foremost, what I would say about my lighting, and for anybody that wants to get into lighting, for those that do lighting probably know this, but there is one rule. What we do, realise this, what we do is not a purely creative medium, it is based in science. Obviously chemistry is dropping out of it a little bit with the invention of digital, but it's very much about physics medium as well. And so there's one rule: angle of incidence equals angle of reflection. And so what we're talking about there is if you put a light source into an image, the angle that light source hits your subject will be exactly equal to the angle that it reflects off it at. And I use that rule an awful lot. So I don't have lighting diagrams. I don't necessarily have specific lighting setups. But I do use that rule an awful lot. We've got a very large light source, obviously to the right of the image. I tend to use big light sources as my main sources of light. very often using open heads, polyboards, and some kind of diffuse, either a roll of diffuse trace, soft lux is one of my favourites, or actually I've got a big 2 metre square scrim that is very easy and handy to fire light through on the front of what is basically a window light. And having flooded, you would think that's a big light source that's going to flood everything, as you will know, Jay.
I do.
Yes. So what you then do is you actually then put shadows in, and you can either flag down with additional polyboards, flag that light source down so that you've got a very soft light source, but you make it more directional by actually putting boards in front of it so that only certain elements of that window light hit the subject. Or you can then put the equivalent of, an anti-reflector, if you like, a blackboard on pointing at the model, because that will actually put in effect, I don't know if there's proper terminology for it, but if I can call it a black reflection into the subject, creating you a shadow. And so by using whiteboards and blackboards, I can actually control my light an awful lot, starting from one big, soft, even source, and I do that an awful lot. And then the background, actually, in this particular influence, because I did 2 background lights on this, in this particular instance, I think it is one light that is on a boom, so quite high, because I can see the edge of the light at the top of the frame. And then casting across the wall, because what you'll see is, because it's a brick wall, you've obviously got a 3-dimensional effect of where the bricks protrude and the cement between them, the mortar between them, is actually slightly set back, and that's giving you the 3-dimensional effect of the wall and the texture of it. And so the light casting down, what you're actually seeing is the shadow from the brick above casting into those mortar gaps and then falling off down. And I think it was probably a strip box that I put onto a boom and cast across that wall. The other way I did it on a later shot, I did slightly different, because we wanted a different texture off the wall, was I actually fired 2 heads, and my assistant, when I told him to do this, looked at me like I was absolutely frigging insane. It's a massive high ceiling, pitch ceiling on this studio. It's an old chapel. And I basically said to him, get those 2 open heads, stick them on full power, stick them up on, we had 2 big wind-up stands available, massive stands, wind them up as pretty much as far as they'll go, about a foot off the back wall, aiming into the ceiling, and they'll just drift light down that whole back wall, and it'll just again use the texture of the brick to bring out the wall. And I have to say, he did what I said. The exposure on the lights was somewhere between half a stop and a stop out, so we just adjusted the power, and it absolutely worked, and it was brilliant. And that kind of, using open head sources, I don't use lots of adapters or anything like that, and the people from the lighting manufacturers hate me when I have to say this, but just knowing how to work the angles of the light very often does the trick for you. And both of those background lights will work in this scenario, although this one, as I say, is actually the boom light that I was using.
Brilliant, mate. Yeah, that's great. And to be honest, you just answered my next question: is do you use many modifiers? And you've already answered that, so we can.
Yeah, it is a bit of a mixture. There are some really nice ones that I like to use. Things like Fluter's Fresnel boxes. You just can't imitate in any other way. And I do like my umbrellas as well. A good quality umbrella is nice to use. But no, generally, I don't have a huge kit that I hang on to. It's kind of looking at shoots and then hiring in stuff if I think, oh, actually, that one would really work on this. So you've got to know what stuff does. But no, I don't carry huge amounts in my kit.
Excellent. I'm just going to rob the screen back, Simon. So
yeah, no
just do that. Right, it should be my screen now. Okay, brilliant. What I've to be honest, a lot of the questions, like I said, you've answered, which has been absolutely. I can't see my screen yet. Let me just show you. Should be seeing it now with a bit of luck. There we go. A lot of the questions you answered as we went through, which is brilliant, about the lighting and the cameras and your process. And what was great that is that we actually, as a company, have been talking a lot in the business side of things about personality and style and creating your styles, and I think that's very evident in your work. You have a very distinctive style, and it's fantastic. And you've also mentioned your workflow, that you have your concepts, your shooting, your practices, and obviously that you use a professional retoucher. It did spark there was one question about the professional using a retoucher. At some point then, do you feel that it's not completely your work? Or is it still that whole collaboration with the stylist, the makeup artist, your original concept, and then them with the finish? Is it still you, or is there an element then of a combined?
It's a mixture of a collaboration. I do feel it's my work because it's very much that everything's photographically generated. So I'm not doing comps. I'm not working, she's not working in CGI for me. She's not adding things in. The backgrounds you see are what I've captured, the expressions in the model. It's really is getting another person's opinion. For me, it's getting another person's opinion on processing out the raw file. And it doesn't, to be honest, it doesn't always, it doesn't always come through the way I want it to. And there are a couple of occasions where actually I've gone back to using the one. Don't tell her I said this because she'll think I'm doing her down. But it's just purely a choice thing of I've gone, actually, for this scenario, I'm going to use this retouch, which is mine, rather than Claire's, because it's very much, it's a bit like grading film, putting the colour grades in and putting the tones in. And if she's doing that to my images, she will do the skin retouch as well. But then I do the skin retouches as myself when she's not touching an image. So no, it's not that she's creating something that I didn't envisage in the first place. It's the fact that we very much work, and I'll direct her and I'll suggest things and say, look, this is where I was thinking of going, but feel free to give me your opinion, because I know that her vision of things a lot of times does fit quite closely to mine. But again, it was a question of really, I picked, that's the one person that I will work with as a retoucher at the moment, and that's not because I just fire them work. It's not a question of, for me, going, oh, there's a retouch here, so I'm going to send them an image because I can't be bothered to do it. She happened to contact me at the right point in time. I was starting to think about what an external retoucher would bring to my work, particularly based on the trajectory that I'm hoping to take with my, I don't feel like I'm in the place I want to be as a photographer. I've got a long way to go to achieve what I would like to achieve as a photographer. And looking at what a freelance retoucher brings to my work is part of that process. So she contacted me at the right time and basically agreed that a very good place to start was over a coffee, not looking at any images, but just having a chat and finding out what we were about, what each other was about, what our concepts were, what we thought, how we liked to work, and whether we connected. And sorry, I've just sunk myself down on the chair by accident. Maybe jump now. Yeah, she connected with me in a way that I was happy to work with, and we got on well, and that's where it started, and that's about 3 years ago now, I think. So some of the stuff's been retouched retrospectively, some of it's been done as I've shot it. But yeah, that's kind of the process, and I'd encourage anybody that's considering using a retoucher to go through that process of look at who's available. Don't just pick the first person that comes along, or somebody that said, oh, I'd love to work on your stuff for you. Actually engage with them in the same way that you would a makeup artist or a model, and find out what they're about, and find out whether they are likely to add something to your work, and move it on a little bit in a collaborative way.
I completely second that from our point of view, and retrospective, that's exactly what we would do, and we'd recommend anybody to do. So I thought it was a really interesting question, and I thought it was really relevant to ask, because I knew I felt. The other two, I've got two questions that I want to finish with you, Simon. One is some advice for somebody getting into this line of things. I like anything, it's the tough, can be the toughest industry in the world. Best way to sort of get noticed. How do you get yourself out there? Do you need to look for management or an agent? any sort of general advice about getting going?
Yeah, really, if you're getting started, unless you have something exceptional to offer, you're not going to get an agent. I don't have an agent at the moment. I have talked to several. I've kind of got an agreement with an agent in the Far East, but it's not on the same relationship as perhaps people would expect a full contractual agent in this country. So yeah, you're going to have to do it on your own, and you've got to find your own way. I particularly subscribe to the idea of, if you can identify your style and you start to look at what you're about and the themes you're about, that it makes it harder, but it makes it easier. But all at the same time, it's a double-edged sword, and you can identify the people that might want to, that your work might fit with. Let's think of a brand, somebody completely off the wall that's doing something, I don't know, some crazy, funky young person's fashion brand would probably not look at the work that I do because stylistically it's not right for them. And so this idea of what I refer to as a machine gun approach to marketing, of kind of buying in 2,000 names and hitting them all, and then waiting to see what comes back, probably not going to get you very far. Whereas if you can pitch something directly to a brand that really might fit with your work, there's more possibilities there. Work on your contacts. Warm contacts are a lot easier than cold ones. So if you have any relationships with anybody, develop those, keep them moving forward, see how they can develop, because obviously that's a lot easier than cold calling. And then as far as getting out on things like social networks and getting a profile, only show what you're absolutely 100% confident in. Obviously, I've shown a couple of images tonight that are a little bit different because of the, this is what we're talking through. But when I'm going out to a client, 100% committed to every single image you put in front of them. If that means you put 6 images in front of them, you put 6 images in front of them. Don't be. I'm sure you and Mark teach your friends on the academy this as well. Jay, is you don't put anything in that is just a filler, because it'll shoot you in the foot. It'll do you far more damage than a good image will ever pull you back. So think about what you're putting on a website, and obviously in terms of social network, please check your terms and conditions, because there are certain sites that obviously we did on the Business Bureau session something on copyright last week, and you need to understand your copyright and what particular websites will allow you to keep and will take from you, and that can be detrimental to you in future. So if you're getting into the industry, be very aware of your terms and conditions and read up on copyright and what that does for your future career.
Mate, you just actually answered my second question in the first one, which is brilliant. Just want to remind everybody that you can find Simon, as he's mentioned earlier. Look for Simon R. Leach. The link's there on the screen at the moment. And just leaves me to say thank you so much, Simon, for joining us again. Thanks again. I'm Jay from the Photography Academy. See you all again soon.